The power went out at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I knew Karen Sullivan would be at my door within the hour. I had been living in the Meadowbrook community in Scottsdale, Arizona, for about 18 months when the main grid failure hit our neighborhood. Most people were scrambling to check their circuit breakers or calling the electric company, but I just walked calmly to my garage and flipped a switch. Within seconds, my house hummed back to life. Lights blazed, air conditioning kicked in, and my refrigerator resumed its quiet work. Through my window, I could see the rest of the neighborhood sitting in darkness, and I felt a twinge of sympathy. But only a twinge. See, when I bought this property, I had done my homework. Vincent James, that's me, and I'm not the kind of guy who leaves things to chance. I'm an electrical systems engineer by trade, worked for 15 years designing backup power systems for hospitals and data centers. So when I moved into this house, the first thing I did was install a completely independent power system. Solar panels covered my roof and garage. Tesla Powerwalls lined one wall of my basement. And yes, I had a natural gas generator as a tertiary backup. The whole system was designed to be completely self-sufficient, and it was 100% legal because it was entirely on my property and didn't feed back into the main grid. I had checked the HOA covenants carefully before installation. There was nothing prohibiting solar panels, nothing about backup generators as long as they met noise ordinances, and nothing about private power systems. I had even attended an HOA meeting to give them a heads up, though I wasn't required to ask permission. Most of the board members had seemed impressed. Most of them, except Karen Sullivan. Karen was the HOA president, a 47-year-old woman with blonde highlights that were always perfectly maintained and an expression that suggested she had just bitten into a lemon. She wore designer athletic wear even though I had never seen her exercise, and she drove a white Mercedes SUV with a license plate that read, HOA. Yes, really. At that initial meeting, she had pursed her lips when I explained my system. I just think it's important that we maintain community standards, she had said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. We wouldn't want anyone to think they're better than everyone else. It's not about being better, I had explained patiently. It's about being prepared. I work from home, and my equipment requires consistent power. Plus, given Arizona's heat, losing power in summer can be dangerous. She had smiled tightly and moved on to the next agenda item, but I could tell she wasn't happy. Over the following months, she found little reasons to knock on my door. My trash cans were visible from the street 15 minutes before the allowed time. My grass was a quarter-inch too tall. My car was parked 3 inches over the edge of my driveway. Each time, I politely corrected whatever minor infraction she had identified, and each time, she looked disappointed that I hadn't argued with her. Now, as I settled back into my home office chair and opened my laptop, I checked the local utility company's website. Major transformer failure affecting approximately 2,000 homes in the area. Estimated repair time, 12 to 18 hours. I grimaced. It was already pushing 95 degrees outside, and by nightfall my neighbors would be sweltering. I felt genuinely bad for them. 53 minutes after the power went out, my doorbell rang. I had underestimated Karen's response time. I opened the door to find her standing there with her phone in one hand and what appeared to be a printed copy of the HOA bylaws in the other. Behind her, I could see 2 other women from the neighborhood, Linda Chen and Margaret Torres, both in their 50s and both loyal members of Karen's inner circle. "Vincent," Karen said, not waiting for me to invite her in. "I'm sure you've noticed the power situation." "Hard to miss," I said mildly. "Transformer failure according to the utility company's website. Should be back up by tomorrow morning. Yes, well. She glanced past me into my brightly lit house, where the air conditioning was clearly running. I've been getting calls from concerned residents. They're wondering why your house has power when everyone else is suffering. Because I have my own power system. You might remember I presented it at the HOA meeting last year. Her smile sharpened. Yes, I remember, and I've been doing some research. According to community standards, all residents are expected to share resources during emergency situations. Your generator qualifies as a community resource. I blinked. I'm sorry, what? Linda stepped forward, consulting her own phone. Section 12, Paragraph 4 of the Emergency Provisions. During declared emergencies, residents with emergency resources are expected to make said resources available to the community in a fair and equitable manner. That's about things like spare sandbags during floods or shared tools during repairs, I said, keeping my voice level. It doesn't mean I have to power everyone's homes. Emergency resources, Karen repeated, emphasizing each word. Your generator is an emergency resource. We're experiencing an emergency. The math is simple, Vincent. First of all, it's not just a generator. I have a complete independent power system with solar panels and battery storage. The generator is just a backup to the backup. Second, even if I wanted to share power, it doesn't work that way. My system is designed to power my house only. It's not connected to the grid. Margaret spoke up, her arms crossed. That seems awfully selfish, having all that power while families with children are sitting in the heat. I'm not being selfish. I invested $60,000 into a system that benefits me. I planned ahead. That's not the same as being selfish. Karen's eyes lit up at the mention of money. $60,000. For a personal power system, that seems excessive, and I'm not sure that kind of modification was properly approved by the Architectural Review Committee. I checked the CC and Articus before installation. There's nothing requiring approval for solar panels or backup power systems. I didn't need permission. We'll see about that, Karen said, making a note on her phone. In the meantime, I'm formally requesting, as HOA president, that you provide power to at least the common areas. The community center, the pool house, and the mailbox pavilion all need electricity. Those are on the main grid. My system isn't connected to the main grid. I physically cannot power those buildings. Then run extension cords. I actually laughed at that. You want me to run extension cords from my house to the community center? That's half a mile away. That's not how electricity works, Karen. You'd have so much voltage drop that nothing would function, assuming the cords didn't melt from the load first. Her face flushed. Don't talk down to me. I'm not an idiot. I'm not suggesting you are. I'm explaining that what you're asking is physically impossible. My system powers my house. That's it. It's not a matter of willingness, it's a matter of basic electrical engineering. Fine, she said, her voice tight. Then I'm formally requesting that you allow vulnerable residents to come to your home to charge their medical devices and phones. Surely your massive system can handle that. I hesitated. That was actually reasonable, and I wasn't a monster. I can do that. People are welcome to come to my porch and use the outdoor outlets. I'll put out a power strip. For a moment, Karen looked frustrated that I had agreed. Then she rallied. The outdoor outlets, in this heat, you won't let them inside where it's cool. I'm not running a hotel, Karen. I'm offering access to power, which I don't have to do at all. People can sit on my covered porch, which is shaded. It's better than sitting in their own homes. This is unacceptable, she said. I'm going to call an emergency HOA board meeting. This kind of antisocial behavior is exactly what our community standards are designed to prevent. Antisocial behavior. I'm literally offering to let people use my electricity for free." But she had already turned away, Linda and Margaret flanking her as she marched back down my driveway. I watched them go, then sighed and went to set up the power strip on my front porch like I had promised. Within an hour, a few neighbors had stopped by. Mr. Patterson from 3 houses down brought his wife's CPAP machine battery to charge. The young couple from across the street, Sarah and Tom, brought their phones and thanked me profusely. An elderly woman I didn't know well, Mrs. Rodriguez, brought her grandson's tablet to charge and a plate of homemade cookies as thanks. Every single one of them was genuinely grateful and understanding. "Don't let Karen get to you," Mrs. Rodriguez said quietly as she collected her grandson's tablet an hour later. "She's been like this since her divorce, needs to control everything." "I'm not worried," I said, though that wasn't entirely true. Karen had the kind of determination that came from having too much time and too much pent-up anger. That was a dangerous combination. The power stayed out all evening. As the sun set and the temperature finally started to drop, I could see some of my neighbors sitting outside, trying to catch any breeze. A few had fired up charcoal grills, making dinner without their electric stoves. It actually looked kind of nice, almost like a block party. Several people waved to me, and I waved back. Around 8 p.m., my doorbell rang again. This time it was Karen with a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, balding, and wearing khaki shorts with a polo shirt that had an HOA board member name tag. "Vincent, this is Gerald Thompson, our HOA Vice President and Compliance Officer," Karen said with an expression of smug satisfaction. "He's here to conduct an inspection of your power system." "An inspection?" I repeated flatly. Gerald looked uncomfortable. "Just a formality. We need to ensure that your installation meets all community standards and local building codes." "It meets all building codes. I had it permitted and inspected by the city. The county electrical inspector signed off on everything." "That may be," Karen interjected, "but the HOA has the right to ensure compliance with our architectural standards. Gerald needs to see your setup." It's 8 o'clock at night. The HOA bylaws allow for inspections with 24 hours notice or during emergencies. I'm invoking the emergency clause. I looked at Gerald, who still appeared uncomfortable. He seemed like he would rather be anywhere else. "Gerald, did Karen explain to you that my system is completely legal and was installed with all proper permits?" "She mentioned that you installed it without HOA approval," he said carefully. "Because no approval was required. I checked the CC and RTCS. There's no prohibition on solar panels, battery systems, or backup generators that meet noise ordinances. My system meets all those requirements." Karen pulled out her phone. Section 8, Paragraph 2. All exterior modifications that alter the appearance of a property as viewed from the street or common areas require Architectural Review Committee approval. Your solar panels are visible from the street. Solar panels are specifically exempted under Arizona state law, I countered. The Solar Rights Act prohibits HOAs from banning or restricting solar installations. Even if your CC and RTCS said no solar panels, which they don't, state law would override it. I watched Karen's jaw tighten. She clearly hadn't expected me to know that. Gerald looked even more uncomfortable. "There's still the matter of the generator," Karen pressed. "I've been receiving noise complaints." "From whom?" "It's not even running right now. My solar batteries are handling the load." "Previous complaints?" "Several residents have reported excessive noise." "That's interesting, considering the generator has run exactly 4 times in the past year, all during the day, all for testing purposes, and never for more than 30 minutes. The manufacturer recommends monthly testing, which I do. The unit operates at 52 decibels from 10 feet away, well below the neighborhood noise ordinance of 70 decibels. Gerald made a note on his clipboard. You seem well informed about the regulations. It's my profession. I design emergency power systems for critical facilities. I probably know these codes better than the inspector who signed off on my installation. Karen's face was getting redder. Fine. Then you won't mind if Gerald takes a look at your setup to verify everything is properly installed. I considered refusing on principle, but Gerald genuinely seemed like a reasonable person who had been dragged into this. Fine. But this is the only inspection you get. If you want another one, you'll need to follow proper procedures and give me actual 24-hour notice in writing. I led them through my house to the garage, where my main electrical panel and control systems were located. Gerald examined everything with a professional eye while Karen stood back, clearly hoping he would find some violation. "This is impressive work," Gerald finally said. "Very clean installation. Is that a Schneider electric inverter system?" "Yes, with outback charge controllers and 6 Tesla Powerwalls. The solar array is 22 kilowatts across my roof and garage. The generator is a Generac Guardian that can produce 24 kilowatts and runs on natural gas from the municipal line. Total system capacity: about 80 kilowatt-hours of battery storage, plus continuous generation capability from solar during the day or the generator when needed. It can run my entire house indefinitely as long as I have natural gas and sun." Gerald whistled softly. "That's a serious setup, medical condition or just preparedness." "I work from home running simulations that require constant power. Plus, I've seen too many critical failures in my career. I don't like being dependent on a single point of failure." He nodded, making notes. "Everything here looks code compliant to me. Your permit stickers are displayed, your breakers are properly labeled, and your grounding system is correct. I don't see any issues." Karen stepped forward. "What about the load capacity? Is it safe to have that many batteries in a residential garage?" "The Powerwalls are designed for residential installation," I said. "They're no more dangerous than having a hybrid car parked in your garage." "Less dangerous, actually, since they're stationary and climate-controlled." Gerald nodded in agreement. "I've seen similar setups. There's nothing unusual here, Karen. It's all properly done." She looked like she wanted to argue but couldn't find an angle. "Fine. But that doesn't address the community resource issue. During emergencies, resources should be shared." "That provision was written for hurricanes and floods," Gerald said gently. "It's about things like sharing sandbags or letting people use your truck to evacuate. I don't think it was meant to include personal infrastructure investments." "An emergency is an emergency," Karen insisted. "And I'm the president of this HOA. I'm making the determination that his power system qualifies as a community resource." "That's not really your call to make unilaterally," Gerald said, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "The board would need to vote on an interpretation like that." "Then we'll vote. Tomorrow morning, emergency board meeting, 10 a.m. She turned and walked out of my garage without another word. Gerald gave me an apologetic look. She's been under a lot of stress lately. Budget issues with the HOA, problems with the landscaping company, the usual headaches. Try not to take it personally." "She's taking it personally," I pointed out. "Yeah," he admitted, "she is. But the board isn't going to force you to give up your electricity. That's not reasonable, and most of us know it. Just hang tight until tomorrow." After they left, I poured myself a whiskey and sat on my back patio, looking out at the dark neighborhood. A few houses had the glow of candles in the windows. I could hear the murmur of conversations from nearby yards. It was actually kind of peaceful in a way. My phone buzzed. It was an email from the HOA sent to all residents. Emergency board meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m. Community Center. Topic: Emergency Resource Sharing Protocols. All residents encouraged to attend. I read it twice, then forwarded it to my lawyer, David Winters, along with a summary of what had happened. David and I went way back. He had handled my home purchase and had reviewed the HOA documents for me before I bought the place. His response came back within 10 minutes. "Don't say anything at the meeting. Let me do the talking. I'll be there." I slept well that night, my house cool and comfortable while most of my neighbors sweltered. I felt a little guilty about that, but not guilty enough to regret my decision to install the system. Being prepared wasn't a crime, no matter what Karen Sullivan thought. The next morning, the power was still out. According to the utility company's updated website, they had discovered additional damage to the underground lines and were now estimating restoration by 6 p.m. People were getting cranky. I could see it in the way neighbors were talking to each other on the street, in the frustrated phone calls I could hear through open windows. I set out the power strip again at 8 a.m., and within minutes, there was a line of people waiting to charge devices. I brought out a cooler with ice water and some folding chairs so people could sit in the shade while they waited. It seemed like the least I could do. At 9:45, I walked down to the community center. The building was hot and stuffy without air conditioning, and people were already gathering, fanning themselves with folded papers and HOA newsletters. David was waiting for me outside, briefcase in hand, looking comfortable in a light gray suit. "Morning, Vincent. Quite a turnout." "Karen's been busy," I said, noting that a lot of the people entering the building kept glancing back at me, whispering to each other. "Let me guess. She's been telling everyone that you're hoarding power while children suffer. Something like that. Classic HOA power trip." "Don't worry. We've got this." The community center meeting room could hold maybe 75 people, and it was nearly full. Karen sat at the front table with the other 4 board members. Gerald, who gave me a small nod, Tracy Winters, the treasurer, Robert Kim, the secretary, and Patricia Hughes, the member-at-large. Karen had papers spread out in front of her and a laptop open. At exactly 10 a.m., Karen called the meeting to order by rapping her knuckles on the table. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. As you all know, we're experiencing a power emergency. What you might not know is that one of our residents, Vincent James, has a private power system that could help the community, but he's refusing to share it." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I kept my expression neutral. "Now, I want to be fair," Karen continued, not sounding fair at all. "Mr. James did offer to let people charge their phones on his porch, but I think we can all agree that's not enough when he has the capacity to help more substantially." An older man I recognized from neighborhood barbecues raised his hand. "What exactly are you proposing, Karen?" "That he run extension cords to all our houses. I'm proposing that we invoke the emergency resource provision of our bylaws and require Mr. James to allow vulnerable residents to shelter in his home, where they can stay cool and safe." The murmurs got louder. David leaned over to whisper to me. "That's actually more reasonable than demanding power, but still not enforceable." Another hand went up, this time from Sarah, the young woman from across the street. "But Vincent has been really helpful. He's been letting everyone charge their devices. And honestly, this isn't his fault. The power company is working on fixing the problem." "That's not the point," Karen said sharply. "The point is community responsibility. We all live here together. When one person has resources others don't, those resources should be shared." Gerald cleared his throat. "Karen, I inspected Vincent's system last night. It's designed for his house only. It's not set up to provide power to other buildings. Then he should have designed it to benefit the community, Karen shot back. That's what being a good neighbor means. David stood up. May I address the board? Karen's eyes narrowed. And you are, David Winters, Mr. James's attorney. I'd like to clarify a few legal points. This is an HOA meeting, not a courtroom. I understand that. But you're discussing taking action that could have legal implications, so I think it's appropriate for me to provide some information to the board and residents. Gerald nodded. Let him speak, Karen. We want to make sure we're doing this right. Karen looked like she wanted to refuse, but she waved her hand dismissively. Fine. 5 minutes. David smiled pleasantly and walked to the front. Thank you. First, let me address the emergency resource provision that's been mentioned. Section 12. Paragraph 4 of your bylaws does indeed discuss sharing emergency resources. However, the provision was written to cover shared tools, vehicles, or supplies during natural disasters. There's no precedent, in this HOA or any other in Arizona, for interpreting that to include permanent home infrastructure investments. The wording says any emergency resources, Karen interrupted. It does. But applying that to a $60,000 private electrical system would be a dramatic expansion of the provision's original intent. If Mr. James had a boat and there was a flood, yes, he'd be expected to help evacuate people. But you're not asking to borrow his boat. You're asking to move into his house. Some people in the audience chuckled at that. Karen's face flushed. David continued. Second, Mr. James's system is his private property. The HOA cannot compel him to provide access to his private property beyond what's already allowed in the CC and Articus, which is limited to exterior inspections during reasonable hours. Forcing him to allow people into his home would be a violation of his property rights. Tracy, the treasurer, spoke up. What about the architectural approval issue? Did he need permission for his solar panels? No. Arizona's Solar Rights Act, passed in 1979 and strengthened in subsequent years, prohibits HOAs from banning or unreasonably restricting solar installations. Even if your CC and Articus prohibited solar panels, which they don't, state law would supersede. Robert, the secretary, made a note. So he didn't break any rules by installing his system, correct? He obtained all necessary permits from the city and county. His system was inspected and approved by certified electrical inspectors. He complied with all applicable laws and regulations. The HOA has no grounds to claim the installation was improper. Karen was practically vibrating with anger. This is ridiculous. He's sitting in his air-conditioned house while the rest of us suffer. And you're saying there's nothing we can do about it. I'm saying that Mr. James made a significant personal investment in infrastructure that benefits him. He had no obligation to consult the HOA, and he has no obligation to share that infrastructure. He's already being generous by allowing neighbors to use his outdoor outlets. Generous, Karen spat. It's the bare minimum. Actually, David said calmly, it's more than the minimum. The minimum would be doing nothing at all, which is his legal right. Patricia, the member at large, raised her hand. I think we're getting off track. The power's supposed to be back this evening anyway. Is this really worth all this conflict? It's about the principle, Karen insisted. Today it's power. Tomorrow it might be water or something else. We need to establish that people can't just opt out of the community. He's not opting out, Gerald said, sounding tired. He's just prepared. There's a difference. Karen glared at him. Whose side are you on? I'm not on anyone's side. I'm trying to be reasonable. Reasonable would be recognizing that we're a community, and communities take care of each other. An elderly man in the back stood up. I recognized him as Mr. Patterson, the one who had charged his wife's CPAP battery at my house. "Excuse me, but Vincent did help my wife. Her CPAP battery was almost dead and she can't sleep without it. He let us charge it, no questions asked, no charge. That's being neighborly." "What more do you want from the man?" Several people nodded and murmured agreement. I could see Karen losing the room. She tried a different approach. "Fine. Since legal compulsion is apparently off the table, I'm asking Vincent directly, as a member of this community, to voluntarily open his home to vulnerable residents until power is restored. Just for today." As a gesture of goodwill, all eyes turned to me. David started to speak, but I touched his arm and stood up. "With all due respect, no, my home is my private space. I'm happy to continue letting people charge devices on my porch, and if anyone has a genuine medical emergency, they should call 911. But I'm not opening my home to strangers, emergency or not. That's a basic safety and privacy boundary." "See," Karen said triumphantly to the crowd. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. Selfish individualism that undermines community values." "It's not selfish to maintain personal boundaries," I replied evenly. "If the situations were reversed, would you open your home to dozens of strangers?" "If I had the resources and others were suffering, yes, I would." "That's easy to say when you don't actually have to do it." The room erupted in cross conversations. Some people were clearly on my side. Others seemed swayed by Karen's framing. Gerald finally rapped on the table for order. "This is getting nowhere," he said. "Karen, you called for a vote on interpreting the emergency resource provision. Let's vote and be done with it." Karen straightened. "Fine. I move that the board interpret Section 12, Paragraph 4 to include private electrical systems during power outages, and require Mr. James to provide either direct electrical access or climate-controlled shelter space to vulnerable residents." "I second for discussion purposes only," Tracy said, "but I want it on record that I think this is overreach." "Vote," Karen demanded. Gerald sighed. "All in favor?" Only Karen raised her hand. All opposed, Gerald, Tracy, Robert, and Patricia all raised their hands. "Motion fails 4-1, Gerald announced. Karen looked stunned. "You can't be serious. You're all just going to let him sit in his mansion while people suffer." "It's not a mansion, it's a 3-bedroom house," I said. "And yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do because it's my house and my system." "This isn't over," Karen said, her voice shaking with anger. "I'll take this to the state HOA regulatory board. I'll file complaints with the county. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you are." David stepped forward. "Miss Sullivan, I strongly advise you to be careful about what you say and do next. Harassment and defamation are both actionable. My client has broken no rules and violated no laws. If you persist in targeting him, we'll have no choice but to respond appropriately." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm advising you of the legal realities. There's a difference." The meeting dissolved into chaos after that. People started leaving, some stopping to shake my hand or pat my shoulder, others giving me dirty looks. Karen sat at the front table, staring at her laptop screen, her face still flushed. As I left with David, I heard her call after me. "This isn't over, Vincent. Not by a long shot." Outside, David chuckled. "She's going to make your life difficult for a while. She already has been. It'll get worse before it gets better. People like that don't let go easily. But you're in the clear legally. Just document everything. Every interaction, every violation notice she sends, everything. Will do. And Vincent, maybe consider that she might escalate beyond HOA complaints. Keep your security cameras rolling." I nodded. I already had a comprehensive security system, another benefit of being an engineer who didn't trust single points of failure. Already on it. The power came back at 4:30 that afternoon, about 90 minutes earlier than the utility company had estimated. I watched through my window as lights started coming on up and down the street, heard the collective sound of air conditioning units humming to life. People emerged from their houses, looking relieved. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, I received a formal violation notice from the HOA. According to the letter, my solar panels created visual blight and needed to be removed within 30 days, or I would face a fine of $100 per day. The letter was signed by Karen Sullivan, HOA president. I forwarded it to David. His response: "Don't respond yet. Let me handle this." 3 days after that, I received another notice. This one claimed that my generator was in violation of noise ordinances and needed to be removed. Never mind that it had barely run in months and was well below the legal noise limit. Then came a notice about my landscaping. Then one about my mailbox being the wrong shade of black. Then one claiming that my house number plaque was mounted a half-inch too far from the specified location in the architectural guidelines. Every notice threatened daily fines. Every notice was signed by Karen. I documented everything and sent it all to David. "She's building a harassment case for you," he said over the phone. "This is good, actually. It shows a pattern of retaliatory behavior. Keep ignoring the notices. I'll respond to them all at once." What about the fines? They're not enforceable. None of these violations are real. But even if they were, she has to follow due process. She can't just unilaterally impose fines. There's a whole procedure involving hearings and appeals. She's skipping all of it. So what do? We wait for her to dig her hole deeper. Then we bury her in it. I didn't have to wait long. A week after the power outage, I came home from grocery shopping to find an orange sticker on my front door. It was from the City of Scottsdale Code Enforcement, stating that a complaint had been filed about unpermitted electrical work and that an inspector would be visiting within 5 business days. I called the number on the sticker and explained that all my work had been permitted and inspected. The woman on the phone sounded apologetic. "Yes, we have your permits on file. Someone filed a complaint claiming the work was unpermitted, so we have to follow up. It's just a formality. The inspector will verify that everything matches your approved plans and will close the complaint." Who filed the complaint? I'm not allowed to say, but it came through the HOA president's office. Of course it did. The inspector came 3 days later, a friendly man named Carlos who spent about 20 minutes looking at my system and comparing it to the permitted plans. "Everything looks good," he said, making notes on his tablet. "Your installation matches the approved plans exactly. I'll file my report today and the complaint will be closed." Does the person who filed the complaint get notified that it was false? They'll be notified that no violation was found, whether they consider that a false complaint is up to them. He gave me a knowing look. Between you and me, we get a lot of HOA complaints that turn out to be personal grudges rather than actual code violations. It wastes everyone's time. Can I file a complaint about the false complaint? He considered that. You could file a harassment complaint with the city if you can show a pattern of frivolous reports. Talk to the city attorney's office. After he left, I called David and updated him. "Add it to the list," he said. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine. Annoyed, but fine." "Good. Because it's probably going to get worse before we can shut it down. These types always escalate." He was right. 2 days later, my natural gas service was interrupted. I called the gas company and was told that a service disconnection request had been filed by the property owner. It took me 2 hours on the phone. including sending photos of my deed, to prove that I was the property owner and no disconnection should have been filed. How did someone even file that request? I asked the supervisor I finally got transferred to. It looks like it was called in by someone claiming to be you. They had your address and account number, but not any verification of identity. The call center rep should have asked for more verification. I'm going to flag this account with extra security notes. I'm sorry this happened. My gas was restored within an hour, but I was fuming. This wasn't just harassment anymore. Someone was actively interfering with my utilities. I called David immediately. "That's identity fraud," he said. "File a police report, right now." I drove to the Scottsdale Police Department and filed a report explaining the whole situation from the beginning. The officer taking my statement, Officer Jennifer Ramirez, listened carefully and took detailed notes. "You have any proof that Miss Sullivan was behind the false gas disconnection?" she asked. "No direct proof, but she's been harassing me for 2 weeks with false HOA violations, and she filed a false complaint with code enforcement. The pattern is clear." Pattern suggests motive, but it's not proof. "I'll file this report, and I recommend you contact your gas company to see if they can trace where the disconnection call came from. If it came from Miss Sullivan's phone, that's evidence." I left the police station feeling slightly better. At least it was on record. The gas company couldn't tell me what number the call had come from due to privacy policies, but they did confirm that the call had come from a mobile phone, not my landline or registered cell number. That evening, I reviewed my security camera footage. I had cameras covering my entire property perimeter. Around noon, when the gas disconnection would have been called in, I saw Karen's white Mercedes drive slowly past my house. She was on her phone and she kept looking at my house as she drove. It wasn't proof, but it was suggestive. I sent the footage to David. The next day, I received a certified letter from the HOA's law firm. It stated that I was in violation of multiple CC&R provisions, and that I had 30 days to cure the violations or face liens against my property. The violations listed were the same ones from Karen's previous notices: the solar panels, the generator, the landscaping, the mailbox, and the house numbers. David called me within an hour of getting the letter forwarded to him. They hired a lawyer. That's actually good. How is that good? Because now we have someone rational to deal with instead of just Karen. I'll contact their attorney and explain that all these violations are false and retaliatory. Most HOA attorneys don't want to pursue cases without merit. It's bad for their reputation. And if their attorney does want to pursue it, then we file a countersuit for harassment and abuse of process, but I don't think it'll come to that. 2 days later, David called me back, laughing. I spoke with the HOA's attorney, nice guy named Richard Stevens. He had no idea about the backstory. Karen told him you were a problem resident who had made multiple violations and refused to comply. And I sent him all the documentation. Your permits, the city inspection reports, photos of your landscaping and mailbox and house numbers showing they are all in compliance, recordings of your generator showing it's below noise limits, everything. I also sent him the timeline of Karen's notices and explained the power outage situation. What did he say? He said, and I quote, "Oh hell. This is a grudge match, not a compliance issue. He's going to talk to the HOA board and recommend they drop everything. He's also going to suggest they rein in Karen before she creates liability for the HOA." I felt a wave of relief. So it's over, probably not completely. Karen's not going to let this go just because her own lawyer told her to, but the HOA itself will back off, which means she'll have to harass you on her own without the organization's backing. That's something, at least. It's a lot. Without the HOA's authority, she's just an angry neighbor. Much easier to deal with. The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following week. I didn't plan to attend, but Gerald called me the day before. "You should come," he said. "There's going to be a vote on Karen's presidency." A vote? Richard, our attorney, explained the situation to the board. "We're not happy. Karen's been using HOA resources to pursue a personal vendetta, and she put the organization at legal risk. Several board members want her removed as president. Can you do that?" The bylaws allow for removal of officers with a 2/3 vote of the board. We've got the votes. I attended the meeting, sitting in the back. The room was less crowded than the emergency meeting, but there were still plenty of residents present. Karen sat at the front table, her expression stony. Gerald called the meeting to order and immediately moved to executive session to discuss personnel matters. Karen objected loudly, but she was outvoted. The board members moved to a side room, and the rest of us waited in uncomfortable silence. They emerged 20 minutes later. Gerald took his seat and cleared his throat. "The board has voted to remove Karen Sullivan as HOA president, effective immediately, due to misuse of her position and creating legal liability for the organization." Karen shot to her feet. "You can't do this. I've been president for 3 years. I've done everything for this community." "The vote was 4-1, Gerald said quietly. "You were the one vote against." "This is because of him," she said, pointing at me. "He's poisoned you all against me. This is because you filed false violation notices, filed a false code enforcement complaint, and tried to use a power outage as an excuse to force entry into a resident's home," Tracy said firmly. "This isn't about Vincent. This is about your behavior. I was trying to help the community. You were trying to punish someone who refused to do what you wanted," Patricia said. "There's a difference." Karen grabbed her papers and laptop, shoving them into her bag. "Fine, fine. You all deserve each other. This community is going to fall apart without me." She stormed out and the room sat in silence for a moment. Gerald sighed. "Well, that was unpleasant. Vincent, on behalf of the board, I want to apologize for everything you've been through. We should have stepped in sooner." "I appreciate that," I said. "For what it's worth, your power system is impressive and we're glad you're part of the community." Several residents applauded and I felt my face flush. "Thank you." I thought that was truly the end of it. I was wrong again. 3 days later my power went out, just my house. I checked my breaker panel. Everything was fine. I checked my solar system. Everything was functioning. Then I went outside and realized that my main utility connection had been physically disconnected. Someone had cut the wire from the pole to my house. I called the police immediately. Officer Ramirez responded, along with a partner. They examined the cut wire, took photos, and reviewed my security footage. The footage from 2 a.m. that morning showed a figure in dark clothes and a hood approaching my utility connection with wire cutters. The angle wasn't good enough to identify the person, but the build and height looked consistent with Karen Sullivan. The figure cut the wire and left quickly. "That's vandalism and destruction of property," Officer Ramirez said. "Probably also qualifies as harassment given the ongoing situation. The problem is we can't ID the person from this footage." "But it has to be her," I said. "Who else would do this?" "I agree it's likely, but likely isn't enough for charges. We need proof. Does your neighbor have any cameras that might have caught the person arriving or leaving?" I checked with Mr. Patterson next door. His camera had caught a white Mercedes SUV parked on the street about a block away around 1:55 a.m. and a figure walking toward my house. At 2:07 a.m., the figure returned and drove away. The license plate was visible for a few frames. Joaquin. Officer Ramirez smiled grimly when I showed her the footage. Now we've got her. That's enough for a warrant. The utility company came out and reconnected my power, muttering about vandalism and how dangerous it was to cut live wires. She's lucky she didn't electrocute herself, the technician said. These lines carry serious voltage. 2 days later, Officer Ramirez called me. We executed a search warrant on Karen Sullivan's residence and vehicle. We found wire cutters in her garage with rubber residue consistent with the coating on your utility line. We also found a notebook with your address and a schedule of your daily routine. She'd been watching you. My stomach turned. That's stalking. Yes, it is. We arrested her an hour ago. She's being charged with criminal damage, stalking, and harassment. The county attorney is also looking at the identity fraud angle for the gas company incident. What happens now? She'll be arraigned, probably make bail, and then it'll go through the court system. You'll likely need to testify. I'd also recommend getting a restraining order. David helped me file for a restraining order, which was granted based on the evidence of stalking and property damage. Karen was ordered to stay at least 500 feet from me and my property. The criminal case took months to wind through the system. Karen pleaded not guilty initially, but eventually took a plea deal. She was convicted of criminal damage and stalking, received probation, a significant fine, and was ordered to pay restitution for my utility repairs and legal fees. The identity fraud charge for the gas company incident was harder to prove, but her phone records showed she had called the gas company's customer service line at the exact time the disconnection request was made. Combined with everything else, it was enough for the prosecutor to include it in the plea deal. She was also ordered to attend anger management classes and undergo a psychological evaluation. The HOA formally apologized to me at a community meeting and passed new bylaws limiting the president's unilateral authority. They also voted to celebrate residents who invested in sustainable and resilient infrastructure. My solar system was featured in the HOA newsletter as an example of responsible home improvement. Several neighbors asked me for recommendations on installing their own backup power systems. I spent a few weekends consulting with them for free, helping them design systems that would work for their needs and budgets. Mr. Patterson ended up installing a small solar battery system specifically for his wife's medical equipment. The young couple across the street, Sarah and Tom, installed solar panels with plans to add batteries later. Karen ended up selling her house and moving out of the neighborhood about 6 months after her conviction. The restraining order made it difficult for her to live so close to me, and I suspected the social stigma of what she'd done made her uncomfortable with the neighbors. Her house sold quickly to a nice family with 2 kids and a dog. Gerald remained HOA president and turned out to be reasonable and competent. The neighborhood actually improved under his leadership. He focused on practical issues like repaving the roads and improving the community center, rather than harassing residents over petty violations. About a year after the whole incident, we had another power outage, this time from a severe monsoon storm. My system kicked in automatically, as did Mr. Patterson's and 3 other houses that had installed backup systems with my help. This time, I did open my home to neighbors who needed help. Mrs. Rodriguez and her grandson came over during the worst of the storm because a tree had damaged their roof. The young couple across the street used my internet to work remotely when theirs went down, but it was my choice. I helped because I wanted to, not because someone demanded it of me. That's the difference between community and coercion. Looking back, the whole situation taught me a lot about the importance of standing your ground. I had invested in my property, followed all the rules, and done nothing wrong. Karen's attempt to use the HOA as a weapon against me had failed because I knew my rights and was willing to defend them. It also taught me about real community. The neighbors who thanked me for the phone charging, who spoke up at the meeting, who later asked for advice on their own systems, they understood what community actually meant. It wasn't about forcing everyone to be the same or demanding that people sacrifice their own interests for some nebulous collective good. It was about people choosing to help each other, voluntarily, because it's the right thing to do. My power system continued to work flawlessly. I ran the generator monthly for testing, maintained the solar panels, and monitored the battery health. During the next few summers, we had several more grid outages from the extreme heat overloading the system. Each time, my house stayed cool and comfortable. Each time, I put out the power strip and cooler of ice water for neighbors who needed help. And each time, I was grateful that I had stood my ground against Karen Sullivan and her misguided attempt to weaponize the HOA. The lawsuit I filed against Karen personally, separate from the criminal case, was settled out of court. Her homeowner's insurance paid a significant sum to cover my legal fees, stress, and damages. David assured me it would likely cause her insurance rates to skyrocket, which seemed like appropriate consequences. The HOA also settled with me for a nominal amount and a formal apology, more to prevent any future claims than because they had real liability. Gerald had cleaned house after becoming president, and the board was much more functional. I framed the letter from the City of Scottsdale Code Enforcement that cleared my electrical system of any violations. It hangs in my garage next to my permit stickers, a reminder that doing things the right way, following the rules, and knowing your rights matters. The whole experience made me a minor celebrity in the neighborhood. People would introduce me to visitors as the guy who stood up to the HOA Karen. It was embarrassing at first, but I came to appreciate it. Not because I enjoyed the attention, but because it represented something important. Standing up to bullies matters. Defending your rights matters. Not letting petty tyrants abuse whatever small power they have matters. Several people thanked me for dealing with Karen because she had apparently been a problem for years. I heard stories of other violations she had tried to enforce, other neighbors she had harassed over minor issues. One couple had nearly sold their house because of her constant complaints about their landscaping, which was perfectly fine. Another man had been cited repeatedly for parking his work truck in his own driveway, despite no rule against it. Karen had been using the HOA as her personal fiefdom, and nobody had been willing to challenge her until I came along. I hadn't set out to be a hero. I had just been a guy defending his property rights. But sometimes that's all it takes. The incident also sparked a broader conversation in the neighborhood about HOA governance and overreach. Several residents started attending board meetings regularly to keep tabs on what the board was doing. The board responded by becoming more transparent, publishing detailed meeting minutes and financial reports. The community became more engaged and more functional. Ironically, Karen's attempt to punish me for not being a team player had made the community stronger and more united. Just not in the way she had intended. My generator sat quietly in my garage, ready to kick on whenever needed. The solar panels on my roof gleamed in the Arizona sun, silently converting light into power and independence. The batteries in my basement stored energy for the inevitable next outage. And I slept well at night, knowing that I had invested in my own security and resilience, that I had stood up for my rights, and that I had helped my community on my own terms, not someone else's demands. The electric company never did fix the underlying grid issues that caused frequent outages. The infrastructure was old, the demand kept growing, and the summer heat kept getting more extreme. But that was their problem, not mine. I had taken responsibility for my own power security, and it had paid off in ways I hadn't even anticipated. Other neighborhoods in Scottsdale started hearing about what happened in Meadowbrook. I got calls from people asking about HOA rights and solar installations. I gave advice freely, helped people understand their rights, and pointed them to good lawyers when they needed one. A local news station even did a story about residential power resilience, featuring my house and system. The reporter asked me what I'd learned from the whole experience with the HOA. I learned that doing the right thing isn't always popular, but it's still the right thing, I said. I learned that bullies exist at every level, even in homeowner associations. And I learned that standing up to them, calmly and legally, is how you stop them from hurting other people. The segment aired during the evening news, and I got dozens of messages from people thanking me for speaking out. Several people mentioned their own HOA horror stories. A few asked if I'd consider running for my HOA board. I politely declined. I had no desire to be in HOA leadership. I just wanted to live in my house, run my equipment, and be left alone. Gerald did a good job as president. He didn't need me micromanaging him. 2 years after the incident, I got a message through LinkedIn from Karen Sullivan. It was short. "I owe you an apology. I was going through a difficult time and took it out on you. I'm sorry for what I put you through. I hope you're doing well." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Part of me wanted to write back a detailed list of everything she had done wrong. But mostly, I just felt tired. Carrying anger is exhausting, and I had moved on with my life. I wrote back. "I appreciate you saying that. I hope you found peace. Take care." She didn't respond, and I didn't expect her to, but it felt like closing a chapter that had been left open too long. Life in Meadowbrook settled into a comfortable rhythm. The community thrived under better leadership. My power system continued to work perfectly, saving me from countless outages over the years. I helped more neighbors install their own systems, creating a small network of resilient homes in the neighborhood. During a particularly bad heat wave 3 years after the original incident, the grid went down for almost 48 hours. By that point, 12 houses in the neighborhood had backup power systems. We coordinated to help the most vulnerable residents, setting up a rotation where people could come to different houses to cool off, charge devices, and get cold water. It was actual community cooperation, voluntarily organized with no HOA demands or threats of fines. That's what real community looks like, not forced compliance or demands that everyone sacrifice equally, but people choosing to help each other because it's the right thing to do. My investment in the power system paid for itself within 5 years through avoided spoiled food, uninterrupted work from home productivity, and prevented damage from temperature extremes. But the real value was peace of mind, knowing that no matter what happened with the grid, I would be fine. That independence is worth more than any dollar amount. And every time I flipped that switch in my garage, every time my house stayed cool and bright while the neighborhood went dark, I thought about Karen Sullivan standing at my door demanding access to my generator. I thought about her frozen expression when the electric company confirmed that I had a completely independent system. I thought about the moment she realized she had no power over me, and never would. That moment had been worth every penny of the $60,000 investment. Because it wasn't just about electricity. It was about autonomy, self-reliance, and the right to make decisions about your own property without interference from petty tyrants with too much time and too little oversight. I kept living in my house in Meadowbrook, kept maintaining my power system, and kept helping neighbors when I chose to. The HOA continued to function well under Gerald's leadership. The community center got renovated. The roads got repaved. The landscaping looked nice. And my generator sat ready. My solar panels kept producing, and my batteries kept storing, independent and reliable, just the way I had designed them to be. Because in the end, that's what it was really about. Not sticking it to the HOA or proving a point or being difficult. It was about being prepared, being independent, and being secure in my own home. Everything else was just noise. And as for Karen Sullivan, wherever she ended up, I hope she learned something from the experience. I hope she found a way to channel her energy into something constructive instead of trying to control people. I hope she got the help she clearly needed. But mostly, I just hope she stayed away from HOAs. The world didn't need another HOA Karen, and I certainly didn't need another encounter with one. My story spread through HOA communities across Arizona and beyond. I got featured in a few online articles about HOA overreach and property rights. David used the case as an example in seminars he taught on HOA law. The security camera footage of Karen cutting my power line became a cautionary tale in HOA management courses about what happens when personal vendettas replace professional governance. Sometimes I wondered if I had handled everything perfectly. Could I have been more diplomatic? Could I have avoided the escalation? But every time I went through it in my mind, I came to the same conclusion. I had done nothing wrong, refused to be bullied, and stood up for my rights through legal and appropriate channels. That was the right approach. The real lesson wasn't about power systems or HOAs or even Karen Sullivan. The real lesson was about boundaries. I had clear boundaries about my property, my privacy, and my rights. When someone tried to violate those boundaries, I defended them firmly but legally. That's what everyone should do. Too many people give in to HOA demands because it's easier than fighting. They pay unjust fines, remove perfectly fine improvements, and live in fear of violation notices. But HOAs only have the power you give them. They're bound by their own bylaws, by state laws, and by basic property rights. When they overstep, you have recourse. You just have to be willing to use it. My house stood as a testament to that principle. Solar panels gleaming, generator ready, batteries charged, completely independent and completely legal. A fortress of self-reliance in a neighborhood that had learned the difference between community cooperation and forced compliance. And every time the power went out, every time my house stayed bright and cool, I smiled and thought about that moment when Karen Sullivan froze as the electric company confirmed my private grid system. That moment when she realized her demands meant nothing because I had built something she couldn't touch, couldn't control, and couldn't take away. That was the moment everything changed, not just for me, but for the whole neighborhood. Because once people saw that you could stand up to HOA overreach and win, they started standing up too. The culture shifted from fearful compliance to informed engagement. The HOA became what it was supposed to be, a service organization that maintained common areas and facilitated community, not an enforcement agency that harassed residents over petty rules. And I had my power system, my independence, and my peace of mind. The lights stayed on, the air stayed cool, and life went on, uninterrupted and unbothered. That's all I had ever wanted. That's all I had ever asked for. And in the end, despite everything Karen Sullivan tried to do, that's exactly what I got. The sun set over Scottsdale, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and purple. My solar panels soaked up the last rays of light, topping off my batteries for the night. Inside my house, everything ran smoothly. Computer humming, refrigerator cooling, air conditioning maintaining a comfortable 72 degrees, independent, resilient, prepared, and completely, legally, undeniably mine.